Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice and praise.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children. And shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up. And shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. It's been a snowy day here in Georgia this morning, but Yahweh's cleared the roads for us, and we've been able to get here and have worship, and it's a blessing to be here. Amen. The name of the message today is called, Are You Out of Order? All right? And I want to talk today about something that Yahweh's put on my heart, which I believe to be very important. Would you agree that a life or death situation would be important? Well, I think that this is perhaps a life or death situation, both first and second death. All right? Have you ever, either in person or on TV, witnessed a person in a courtroom who has gotten out of order? Yeah, we've seen that. When someone in the courtroom starts to act up in a way that's not according to customary rules or of behavior, what usually happens? The judge will usually say, You're out of order. Sorry, I didn't mean to point at you, Drew. That just now, one of the reasons that the judge says this is because he expects his courtroom to stay orderly, and he is not going to tolerate disorder in his courtroom. It's a sign of disrespect, and he is simply not going to put up with it. Now, just suppose the judge says, You are out of order, but you were to continue with the objectionable behavior, what would happen? Well, most likely you'd be held in contempt of court, right? And that means you go into jail. And you know what? You don't even have to be the defendant. You could just be a spectator that won't stop talking to the person sitting beside you, and the judge could hold you in contempt of court. Get out of order, and you go to jail. All right? Do you suppose that when the earth is judged that Yahweh might hold some of us in contempt? That's a good question. Let's look at Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. We're going to be on page 598 in the 1998 ISR. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. Now, at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of distress such as never was since there was a nation until that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Does that sound like judgment? And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, some to everlasting life, and some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence. The KJV translates that word abhorrence as contempt. Isn't that interesting? All right. Now, I want to suggest to you that Yahshua gave us an order of operation that too many of us get out of order. And when we do, it creates all sorts of problems. And we don't want to be found out of order when Yahweh brings judgment, because that's a sentence that we won't get out of. All right? So, what's this order that I'm speaking of? Well, let's look at Matthew chapter 22. And we are going to be on page 944 in the ISR. I'm going to start reading in verse 34. And this is the order that I'm speaking of. Matthew 22, verse 34. But the Pharisees, having heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, were gathered together, and one of them, one learned in the Torah, did question, trying him and saying, Teacher, which is the great command in the Torah? Okay, here comes your order of operation. Verse 37. And Yahshua said to him, You shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your being, with all your and with all your mind. This is the first and great command. And the second is equal to it. Is that what yours says? Does yours say equal to it? It says like it. Thank you very much. You see, like means similar to. All right? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hang all the Torah and the prophets. All right? How easy is it for us to get these two out of order? Very easy. All right? Do we ever put what Yahshua calls the second command ahead of loving Yahweh with all our heart, being, and with all our minds? And I would say the answer is likely, yes, we do. At least sometimes. Instead of putting Yahweh first, we love our neighbor as ourselves first. And since we wouldn't want someone to offend us, we naturally don't want to run the risk of offending others. All right? So we don't tell them what the Scripture has to say about places in their lives where they might need some help. Not condemnation. Okay? Help. But to tell you the truth, in many instances, more than being concerned about offending, it's really more about our own self-centeredness than it is about loving our neighbor's feelings. Because we don't want to come across as self-righteous busybodies or judgmental or whatever and have to deal with the negative pushback in whichever form it might come. All right? Can you relate to that? You just don't want to have to deal with any negative consequences. All right? Nevertheless, for whatever reason, we put people ahead of Yahweh, and when we do that, neither is served properly. Amen. All right? Now, before we go much further, I'd like to make something clear. I'm not speaking about the board members here. And to the people watching this at home, I'm not speaking to the board members at the congregations where you worship or other board members that you might know. I'm speaking to everyone else, not the board members. All right? You know who the board members are, don't you? You don't know who the board members are? These are the members who immediately upon hearing the charge that you were putting people ahead of Yahweh, instead of putting Yahweh first, began thinking smug thoughts about their brothers and their sisters. Okay? Yahshua talked about the board members. Let's look at that together. Matthew 7. I think this will clear things up for you. Matthew 7, page 923, verse 3. Matthew 7, verse 3. And why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eyes and you do not notice there's a board in your own? Now do we know what a board member is? Or how is it that you say to your brother, let me remove the splinter out of your eye, and see a board is in your own eye? Hypocrite. First remove the board from your own eye, and you shall see clearly to remove the splinter out of your brother's eye. Some of you are board members. Members of the body with great boards in your eyes. I'm not talking to you. I'm not going to look around the room. Some folks are afflicted with terminal self-righteousness. It expresses itself with symptoms not of righteous indignation, but self-righteous indignation. All right? Those aren't the same things. Yahshua had righteous indignation when he went through the set-apart place turning over the tables. All right? Though most any of us can lumber into a judgmental point of view, finding it hard to see correctly, board members usually have no trouble at all correcting and offending others. Anybody know any board members? I know why you're snickering. They are out of order too, but they typically put themselves ahead of both their neighbor and Yahweh. Right? Paul gives a pretty good description of a board member in 2 Timothy. Let's look there, 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. We'll start reading verse 2. We're going to be on page 1157. 2 Timothy 3, verse 2. For men shall be, what are those next three words? Lovers of self, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, thankless, wrongdoers, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, haters of good, betrayers, reckless, puffed up, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of Elohim, having a form of reverence, but denying its power, and turn away from these. Board members have a form of reverence, but are first and foremost lovers of self. They aren't really trying to be helpful or to show love to their neighbor. They're mostly trying to make themselves feel superior. Okay? Matthew chapter 12, verse 33. Page 930. Matthew 12:33. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree rotten and its fruit rotten. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of adders, how are you able to speak what is good, being wicked? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. You see, our mouths are a gauge to help us measure the condition of our hearts. For the mouth speaks of the overflow of the heart. All right? It's an indicator of our heart. So, here's a good little exercise. Does joy come out of your mouth? You have joy in your heart. That's easy. However, does anger come out of your mouth? This is real hard to figure out, isn't it? You have anger in your heart. All right? Does impatience come out of your mouth? You have impatience in your heart. Does disrespect for your elders come out of your mouth? You have disrespect for your elders in your heart. Condemnation and judgmentalness. How about profanity? When you speak, do words which describe raw sewage come out of your mouth? Your heart was not designed to be a lift station, if you know what that is. Does gossip come out of your mouth? You have gossip in your heart. Do drunken words come out of your mouth? You have drunkenness in your heart. YHWH said this. So do selfish words come out of your mouth? You have selfishness in your heart. Do quarrelsome words come out of your mouth? You have quarreling in your heart. You see how easy this is? It's not hard at all, is it? All right? Do your words try to find justification for bad behavior by proclaiming loopholes in the Torah? Seems like we talked about that last week, didn't we? All right? You have rebellion in your heart. And the list could just go on and on. But you know what we should do? We should listen to our mouths. That's a good one, isn't it? We should listen to our mouths. All right? Board members usually have self-righteousness coming out of their mouths. And if you're a board member, you need to get off the board. They will need, and we all oftentimes need to get that board out of our eyes before we can begin to go into the proper order as YHWH outlined. As much time as I spent on that, this message is not about them. It's about those of us who put people ahead of Yahweh. All right? Do we ever find ourselves putting people ahead of Yahweh? I would suggest to you that it's easier than you might think. I want to show you how easy it can be. Churches are places where people go to worship and read the Scriptures, right? You might as well go and say yes, even though they don't believe like we do. That's what they do there, all right? How many of you have ever, most of us have come out of churches, how many of you have ever been to a church and seen a copy of the 10 words or the 10 commandments hanging in the church? Okay, sure we have, right? How many of these 10 words or 10 commandments do they actually keep? All right? Do they have graven images, other mighty ones, against Yahweh's face, made in the likeness of things in the heavens above, or on the earth, or in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth? All right? Do they bow down before them? Sure, they bow down before them. All right? They'll say they're not praying to them, but they're bowing down before them. All right? Do they bring the name of Yahweh to naught? Okay. Do they remember the Sabbath to keep it set apart? Not in most cases. Typically, they keep the last 6. And they work hard at keeping the last 6, but they keep the last 6. Exodus 20, verses 12 through 17. Respect your father and your mother. You do not murder. You do not commit adultery. You do not steal. You do not covet. You do not bear false witness against your neighbor, and you do not covet your neighbor's stuff. Okay? Isn't it interesting that the last 6 are about our relationship with other people, and the first 4 are about our relationship with Yahweh, our Creator? All right? So they put the treat other commands ahead of the treat Yahweh commands. Isn't that interesting? But it's nothing new. And did you know what? When we were at church, we did that. And I'd say sometimes it's a lot easier to do it than we might realize. Matthew 19. Oh, we're close by. Matthew 19, verse 16. And see, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? And he said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you wish to enter into life, I told you this is a matter of life and death, guard the commands. He said to him, which? And Yahshua said, You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, respect your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Note that all of these are commands concerning how we deal with others, just like what we talked about, what happens at church. Right? Yahshua even threw in, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, for good measure, just to firm this idea up. Now note what the young man says, verse 20. And the young man said to him, All these, which concern how I deal with others, he didn't say that, I put that in there. I have watched over from my youth. What do I still lack? And Yahshua said to him, If you wish to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. And when the young man heard the words, he went away sad, because he had many possessions. You see, the young man was able to love others, but was unable to love Yahweh with all of his resources. All right? And following Yahshua means a willingness to give it all to Yahweh and put Yahweh first. Okay? Now, I want to look at a couple of stories in the Scripture where someone put people ahead of Yahweh and see what kind of results that it produced. All right? The first one is the story of Eli, and his sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And this story takes 4 chapters in 1 Samuel. And we're going to need to skip around a little just for the sake of time. All right? So you might as well start turning to 1 Samuel. All right? And in the first chapter, we learn that Yahweh blesses Hannah with a child, and she dedicates him to Yahweh as she said that she would, and she named him Shemuel. Right? Now, in chapter 1, verse 3, we're going to skip on down to verse 3, it says, Now, this man went up from his city year by year to worship and to slaughter to Yahweh of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of Yahweh, were there. All right, now we're going to skip to chapter 2. All right? And we're going to start reading in verse 12. And the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They did not know Yahweh. And the ruling of the priests with the people was that when any man offered a slaughtering, the priest's servant shall come with a three-pronged flesh hook in his hand while the meat was cooking, and shall thrust it into the basin or kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself all the flesh hook brought up. Thus they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who slaughtered, "Give meat for roasting to the priest, for he does not accept cooked meat from you but raw." And the man said to him, "Let the fat be burned up first, and then take as much as your being desires." He would then answer him, "No, but give it to me now, and if not, I shall take it by strength." Look at this. And the sin of the young men was very great before Yahweh, for the men despised the offering of Yahweh. These are not good boys, are they? All right? But Shemuel, verse 18, was attending before Yahweh, a youth wearing a linen shoulder garment. And his mother would make him a little robe and bring it to him year by year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly slaughtering. And Eli blessed Elkanah, that was the man, and his wife, and said, "Yahweh give you offspring from this woman for the one she prayed for and gave to Yahweh." And they would go to their own home. And Yahweh visited Hannah so that she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, while the young Shemuel grew before Yahweh. And Eli was very old, and he had heard all that his sons were doing to all Yisrael, and how they lay with the women who were assembling at the door of the tent of meeting. And Pentecost was even married. Okay? And he said to them, "Why do you do deeds like these? For I hear of your evil deeds from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear making the people of Yahweh transgress. If one man sins against another, Elohim shall judge him. But if a man sins against Yahweh, who shall pray for him?" But they did not listen to the voice of their father, though Yahweh was pleased to put them to death. Now, Eli said, all right, and we see here that Eli has heard of these deeds from all the people. Right? But he's done nothing to stop it. This wasn't something that just showed up one day. You know, he put his sons ahead of Yahweh. All right? Verse 26. And the young Shemuel was growing in stature and was in favor with Yahweh and also with men. And a man of Elohim came to Eli and said to him, "Thus said Yahweh, did I not clearly reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Mitzrayim in Pharaoh's house, even to choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon my altar, to burn incense, and to wear a shoulder garment before me? And did I not give to the house of your father all the offerings of the children of Israel, which Israel made by fire? Why do you kick at my slaughtering and my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling place, and esteem your sons above me?" That's kind of what we're talking about today, right? "To make yourselves fat with the best of all the offerings of Yisrael, my people. Therefore, Yahweh Elohim of Yisrael declares, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father would walk before me forever. But now Yahweh declares, far be it from me, for those who highly esteem me, I highly esteem, and those who despise me are lightly esteemed. See, the days are coming that I shall cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, so that an old man shall not be found in your house, and you shall see an enemy in my dwelling place, despite all the good which Elohim does for Yisrael, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. But any of your men whom I do not cut off from my altar is to consume your eyes and grieve your life, and all the increase of your house die as men. And this is the sign to you that comes upon your 2 sons, upon Hophni and Phinehas, In one day they are going to die, both of them. And I shall raise up for myself a trustworthy priest who does according to what is in my heart and my being, and I shall build him a steadfast house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. And it shall be that everyone who is left in your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a cake of bread, and say, please put me in one of the priestly positions to eat a piece of bread. All right, chapter 3, verse 1. And the young Shemuel was serving Yahweh before Eli, and the word of Yahweh was rare in those days, no vision breaking forth. And it came to be in that day that Eli was lying down in his place, and his eyes had begun to grow dim, so that he was unable to see. And the lamp of Elohim had not gone out in the Hekal, the temple of Yahweh, where the ark of Elohim was, and Shemuel was lying down to sleep. And Yahweh called to Shemuel, and he answered, here I am. He then ran to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call you. Lie down again. So he went and lay down again, and Yahweh called Shemuel. And Shemuel arose and went to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. But he answered, my son, I did not call. Lie down again. Now, Shemuel did not yet know Yahweh, and the word of Yahweh was not yet revealed to him. And Yahweh called Shemuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, here I am, for you did call me. And then Eli understood that Yahweh had called the youth. So Eli said to Shemuel, go lie down, and it shall be, if he calls you, say, speak, Yahweh, for your servant hears. And Shemuel went and lay down in his place. And Yahweh came and stood and called as at other times, Shemuel, Shemuel. And Shemuel answered, speak, for your servant hears. And Yahweh said to Shemuel, see, I am doing a matter in Yisrael, at which both the ears of everyone who hears it shall tingle. In the day that I shall confirm against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. For I have declared to him that I am judging his house forever for the crookedness which he knows, because his sons cursed Elohim, and he did not rebuke them. And therefore I have sworn to the house of Eli that the crookedness of the house of Eli shall never be atoned for by slaughtering or grain offering. And Shemuel lay down until morning, and he opened the doors of the house of Yahweh, and Shemuel was afraid to report the vision to Eli. Then Eli called Shemuel and said, Shemuel, my son. And he answered, here I am. And he said, what is the word that he spoke to you? Please do not hide it from me. Elohim do so to you, and more also, if you hide the word from me, of all the words that he spoke to you. And Shemuel reported to him all the words, and hid none from him. And he said, it is Yahweh. Let him do what is good in his eyes. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the Philistines attack, and they take the Ark of the Covenant, because Yahweh said that an enemy would be standing in his set-apart place. It happened. But they took the Ark of the Covenant because the elders of Israel think that taking it out of the most set-apart place and bringing it into the battlefield would be a good idea. Who would have thunk it? All right. Now, it was not a good idea. But I'd like for you to skip down to chapter 4 and verse 4. And the people sent to Shiloh, and they brought from there the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh of hosts, dwelling between the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of Elohim. All right, now skip down to verse 10. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten, and every man fled to his tent, and the slaughter was very great, and there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. And the Ark of Elohim was captured, and the two sons of Eli died, Hophni and Phinehas. And a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line that same day and came to Shiloh with his garments torn and dirt on his head. And he came in and saw Eli sitting on a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the Ark of Elohim. And the man came into the city and reported it, and all the city cried out. And Eli heard the noise of the outcry and said, "What is the noise of this uproar?" And the man came hastily and informed Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were so dim that he was unable to see. And the man said to Eli, "I am he who came from the battle, and I fled today from the battle line." And he said, "What was the matter, my son?" And the messenger answered and said, "Yisrael has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. And your 2 sons have died, Hophni and Phinehas, and the ark of Elohim has been captured." And it came to be, when he made mention of the ark of Elohim, that Eli fell off the seat backwards by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he ruled Yisrael 40 years. Right, and see, that all of this is happening just as Yahweh said that it would. Both these boys dying the same day. Verse 19. And his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was pregnant, about to bear. And when she heard the news that the ark of Elohim was captured, that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and gave birth, because her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman who stood by her said to her, "Do not fear, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer, nor did she set her heart to it. And she called the child Ichabod, saying, "The esteem has departed from Yisrael, because the ark of Elohim was taken, and because her father-in-law and her husband." And she said, "The esteem has departed from Yisrael, for the ark of Elohim was taken." Now, you see, Eli got out of order. Amen? Eli got out of order. All this tragedy was a result of putting people, in this case family members, ahead of Yahweh. Amen? All right? Eli should have loved Yahweh first and his son second. He should have stopped their bad behavior. But since he did not, he and his sons, who he did not correct but rather esteemed above Yahweh, died as a result. And you know what? I'd say that Eli loved his 2 sons to death. Literally. Right? And people do that sometimes when they don't discipline their children. They don't want them to hurt. They don't, and they'll love them to death. Had he loved in the proper order, he might have corrected their way and saved all their lives. Right? Here's another one. Genesis chapter 3. Just going to read one verse here, I think. Is that right? Genesis, Bereshit chapter 3. Verse 6. Right? And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, and she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Now, Paul tells us that Adam was not deceived. All right? And you don't have to turn here. Just 1 Timothy 2:14 says, "And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, having been deceived, fell into transgression." Adam put Hawa ahead of Yahweh. He didn't have more ribs. All right? He was taking care of the one that he had. All right? Had Adam done the right thing, he would have stood up for Yahweh and his Torah and compelled her to stop. At the very least, he could have reasoned with her, but there's no indication that he did. Perhaps he loved her to death, but whatever. When it came to the 2 great commands of the Torah, Adam was out of order. Amen. And it cost them their lives. One of the reasons that this is important is because quite frequently, we mentioned some of this in our study earlier today, in Messianic, Hebrew roots, and yes, even Yahweh communities, a lot of people say that Yahweh's people need to have unity. You ever heard that? Right? There seems to be at least a couple of impediments to this whole unity idea. At least a couple. Right? The first problem that comes to mind is this. What are you willing to give up for the sake of unity? Are you willing to give up your ideas regarding the Sabbath, the Passover, the calendar, crescent versus conjunction? Are you willing to give up your ideas about circumcision, the pronunciation of the names, wearing tzitzit? Are you willing to give that up? Abortion? Are you okay for that being all right? Sexual impropriety, hetero and homosexual. Are you willing to accept that? Multiple wives, etc., etc. If we're going to have unity, somebody's going to have to change something, right? So what's the problem that stands in the way of unity? What are you willing to give up? Right? Most of the people that are talking about unity in Yahweh's people aren't really very willing to budge about much at all. Right? Then there are those who talk about many of these same things, or they won't talk about many of these same things because they view them as too controversial. They're too controversial. They want to avoid controversial topics because they're concerned about upsetting people and causing division. All right? Now, don't get me wrong. We should be kind. Isn't this what I usually tell you? We need to be kind, merciful, and gentle with one another. So sometimes your meat could choke a milk baby to death. Okay? However, have you ever thought about this? All of our topics are controversial. To someone. To someone, somewhere, at some time, all of our topics are controversial. See, watch this. The name of Yahweh is controversial to those who are, quote, giving glory to God. The fact that, quote, God is the proper name of a pagan deity with whom Yisrael whored and therefore a name of sluttery, that's strong words, isn't it? All right? A name which they call on when they sing praises of adoration, and to misuse that name is quote, taking the Lord's name in vain. To them, the name of Yahweh can be very controversial. You see that? Never mind the fact that that's what the third commandment's about. The name Yahshua is controversial to those who are singing, Jesus is the sweetest name I know. All right? Do we not discuss the names because it's controversial? The Sabbath is controversial to someone who's keeping Sunday. Yahweh's dietary laws are controversial to a person who is earnestly asking their Heavenly Father to bless their pork chop before eating it. But the fact of the matter is that these controversial topics must be broached. Right? If one is to come into the will of Yahweh. Amen? We talked about that last week too, didn't we? Or we could just leave it alone to avoid upsetting someone, but then, guess what? We would be out of order. Amen? We would be out of order. Right? Proverbs 27:17 says, iron is sharpened by iron, and a man sharpens the face of his friends. Right? There are some who think that we will never have unity. We need to talk about controversial subjects if we are ever going to have unity. That doesn't mean that we sit around and consider every I want to be careful here. Every new idea that might come along. All right, and just because it's a new idea doesn't mean that it's not right. I'm just saying sometimes. You ever notice how on the internet how many authorities we have on subjects these days that are in disagreement with one another, but they're still regarded as authorities? Just saying. Right. Actually, Yahshua talked about having unity too. How am I going to pull this together? Are you aware of that? Look at John chapter 17. Yochanan 17. We are going to be on page 1041 and start reading in verse 1. John 17, verse 1. Yahshua said these words and lifted up his eyes to the heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Esteem your Son, so that your Son also might esteem you, as you have given him authority over all flesh, that he should give everlasting life to all whom you have given him. And this is everlasting life, that they should know you, the only true Elohim, and Yahshua Messiah, whom you have sent. I have esteemed you on the earth, having accomplished the work that you have given me that I should do. And now, esteem me with yourself, Father, the esteem which I had with you before the world was. I have revealed your name to the men whom you gave me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have guarded your word. Now, they have come to know that all you gave to me is from you, because the words which you gave to me, I have given to them, and they have received them, and they have truly known that I came forth from you, and they believe that you sent me. I pray for them. I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me, for they are yours, and all mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been esteemed in them. And I am no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to you. Set apart, Father, guard them in your name which you have given me, so that, here we go, they might be one as we are. All right, there's unity. When I was with you in the world, I was guarding them in your name which you have given me, and I watched over them, and not one of them perished except the son of destruction, that the scripture might be filled. And now I come to you, and I speak these words in the world, so that they have my joy completed in them. I've given them your word, and the world hated them, because they are not of the world, as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the wicked one. They are not of the world, and I am not of the world. Set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also sent them into the world. And for them I set myself apart, so that they too might be set apart in truth. And do not pray for these alone, but also for those believing in me through the world, that they might be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, so that they too might be one in us, so that the world might believe that you have sent me. And the esteem which you gave me I have given them, so that they might be one as we are one. I in them, and you in me, so that they might be perfected into one, so that the world knows that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those whom you have given me might be with me where I am, so that they see my esteem which you have given me, because you loved me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, indeed the world did not know you, but I knew you. And these knew that you sent me. And I have made your name known to them, and shall make it known, so that they love with which you loved me might be in them, and I in them. That is about unity, being one with your Father, Yahshua, and each other. Right? That's about being you. Do you think they can be one in truth with everyone having their own different ideas? No, they can't. All right? Yahshua was one with the Father because he did the desire of his Father first. All right? He was not out of order. That's the only way we can have unity. We must do the desire of the Father too. So how do we do that? Well, let's look at Matthew chapter 6. We're going to start reading. Well, let's see. We're only going to read one verse in Matthew 6. And then we're going to turn to 12. Matthew 6, verse 33. Here's how you do it. But seek first the reign of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these matters shall be added to you. Hallelujah. All right. Now, Matthew 12. In verse 46. And it says, "And while he was still talking to the crowd, see, his mother and his brothers stood outside seeking to speak with him. And one said to him, 'See, your mother and your brothers are standing outside seeking to speak with you.' But he answering said to the one who spoke to him, 'Who is my mother and who are my brothers?' And having stretched out his hand towards his taught ones, he said, 'See, my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the desire of my Father who is in the heavens is my brother and sister and mother.'" If we're ever going to have unity as Yeshua intended, it will have to include doing the desire of the Father. And that will likely take delving into controversial topics. It did in Yeshua's day. Controversial for all of us, not just controversial for everyone else, right? But didn't Yeshua say that he came to bring a sword? Well, Matthew 10, one page back, 2 pages, verse 32. "Everyone therefore who shall confess me before men, him I shall also confess before my Father whom is in the heavens. But whoever shall deny me before men, him I shall also deny before my Father who is in the heavens. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth." In other words, unity for the sake of unity. "I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to bring division, a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies are those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." He's talking about being out of order. Amen? All right, now, this is making the second great command first, which results in putting people's stuff ahead of Yahweh and Yahweh's desire. Verse 38. And he who does not take up his stake and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life shall lose it, and he that has lost his life for my sake shall find it." All right? So he brought a sword that cuts away and brings division between people who do not put Yahweh first. All right? Once you cut away the things that do not follow Yeshua's example, which puts Yahweh first, once you cut that away, then you will have unity because you will be echad with Yahweh and Yeshua. Right? But we cannot shy away from controversial subjects. Not if we're ever to search out the desire of Yahweh. Amen? Please don't leave this message thinking that Stan said that we shouldn't care about others. I did not say that at all. All right? Loving others as yourself is the second great command in the Torah. Out of all the commands in the Torah, Yeshua said, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." That's number 2. Out of all of them. That means that loving your neighbor is very, very important. Amen? And should not go undone for a Torah keeper seeking to do the desire of Yahweh. Isn't it funny how that works? But he said the great command in the Torah, number 1, is that you shall love Yahweh with all your everything. Right? On these 2 hang all the Torah and the prophets. Yahweh wants you to love your neighbor as yourself. Just as much as you love yourself. He wants you to love people. But he wants you to love him first and most. If we get these 2 commands out of order, well, simply put, we put people first. And guess who gets number 2 place in your heart? All right? The Creator rather than the created. Yahweh comes in second place. And when we esteem something created more than the Creator, do you know what that becomes? That's exactly right. It becomes it's a form of idolatry. You cannot love your neighbor as yourself first and then afterwards profess to love Yahweh with all your stuff. See? I once heard a minister say that a family is out of order when a child gets in between the father and the mother. Right? He wasn't implying that the child should be neglected. By the strong bond between the husband and the wife, the child is taken care of even better. Right? There's a proper order in the family, and the same principle applies to the family of Elohim. Right? If we will keep these commands in their proper order, everything else will fall into place. It just will. Right? Don't need to turn there, just one verse. Exodus 26 says, "But showing kindness to thousands who love me and guard my commands." All right? And was it not Yahweh who gave us the command to love our neighbor as ourselves? So, if we love Him and guard His commands, then our neighbor gets loved and taken care of too. It's just that easy. That's just the way it is with Yahweh. Right? When things are done according to His way, things just work out. And on Judgment Day, I do not want to hear, "Away with him, he did not love his neighbor as himself." Amen? Right? But neither do I want to hear, "Away with him, he's out of order." Love Yahweh with all your heart, all your being, and all your might. Then love your neighbor as yourself. Anything else is out of order, and it could mean life or death. Yevrekeka Yahweh ba'ishmareka, Ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikuneka, Yasai Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem laka shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.